Welcome back. Panel is here. Yamiche Alcindor, moderator of Washington Week on PBS. Amy Walter, the editor-in-chief of the Cook Political Report. Republican political consultant Matt Gorman, and former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. Welcome all. So I'll shut up. Yamiche, initial reaction to the interview.
My initial reaction to the interview is that she really wanted to get across how concerned she is about the state of the country. She talked about what she called the activist court in the Supreme Court, but she also talked about sort of the fact that it's a shame, that's the word that she used, when you think about election deniers being elected all over this country in the state of democracy. I was very struck by the fact that she said she didn't have an experience with the idea that 70% of Republicans don't believe that she and President Biden were fairly elected, and that she hadn't really thought about 2025, what she would do if she was presented with election results that didn't reflect what the people had voted on. Because as someone who's been out on the campaign trail, I can tell you that a lot of Republicans around this country, and especially the ones that are showing up to campaign rallies, they do not believe that she and President Biden were elected fairly. It's a big, big issue. It's a divisive one, but it's one that's real. So those polls, I see that on the ground when I'm reporting. But you can tell that the vice president absolutely is really concerned about that and hopes that this country can figure out how to move forward.
Yeah, but doesn't that also, it melds perfectly with the case that President Biden is trying to make in this election, which is the folks who do believe that the election was stolen or overturned, they are a minority. We are bigger than they are, right? Uniting the soul of America, that piece of the conversation. So it, in some ways, is a way to react to suggestions that speech was too divisive, right? By calling semi-fascism and MAGA America, we're really separating a very small portion of the Republican Party from the bigger American electorate. That maybe 70% of Americans say they believe this, but I don't buy that. I buy that we're stronger than that. We're more united than that.
I got the impression she didn't like having to define semi-fascism.
No, and to your point, though, I think it reminded me, and it pointed out that this whole strategy, it seems, from Biden is, the strategy is very ham-handed. He goes and says everyone's a semi-fascist, walks it back. MAGA, well, not everybody's MAGA. And now you have her seeming to walk this back. It's totally incongruous. Yeah. And look, again, I think all of that rings hollow if, as you asked it, they're boosting these candidates who are threats to democracy in Senate primaries across the country. So if you're so concerned about that, what about Colorado Senate, New Hampshire Senate right now? Peter Meyer voted to impeach Trump. Well, he's going to be gone. So it rings hollow.
Claire?
Well, first of all, I thought she did a terrific job in the interview. I think she has had a rough road to go. I remember distinctly, Chuck, being in the cloakroom in the first 2 years of the Biden vice presidency, and how many of my colleagues were looking down their noses at Joe Biden.
Mock him, right?
Mocking him, it's a hard job, the vice presidency. It's even harder, I think, if you are a woman in that job who is seen as an opponent by a lot of the insiders in Washington for the presidency. And so there's a lot of chattering behind the scenes of trying to diss Kamala Harris. I think this interview shows that maybe all the dissing of Kamala Harris is way premature. I think she did a good job and stood strong.
I want to point out the court stuff, because this was coincidental, but we heard from the Chief Justice, John Roberts, on Friday about this issue of court legitimacy. You heard what she called the court. Here's his defense.
The court has always decided controversial cases. The decisions have always been subject to intense criticism, and that is entirely appropriate. But I don't understand the connection between opinions that people disagree with and the legitimacy of the court.
Claire, I'm going to let you go first on this one. This is one you're like, I guess he did not follow the confirmation process.
He's so out of touch. I mean, this interview shows why the numbers for the Supreme Court are so bad. For him to say something like that, he just doesn't get it. You don't take away a right that has been around for 50 years, and then you don't have a party go to the extremes of trying to make sure rape victims have to have forced birth. You don't do all that and not have it splash back on the Supreme Court. And they all said they respected precedent when they were confirmed. I heard him. America heard him. Clearly, they didn't. And, you can feel me getting angry at John Roberts right now, because he knows better when he says that stuff.
He's trying to defend the court, and I do think it gets harder and harder for him.
It does. And look, that was his mission when he came in. He wanted to try and depoliticize the court. But look, is the court depoliticized, more politicized, or are we? If we had upheld Roe, if the court had upheld Roe, you wouldn't be hearing that. I think activism really is lying in the eye of the beholder right now. And we're in a situation where if you don't like it, then it's really not about the decision. It's about the legitimacy.
Is court, by the way, is court a better issue than abortion specifically?
Is court a better issue than abortion? I will say that when I talk to women out on the campaign trail, they're both attacking the court and attacking the fact that they feel like they do not have the rights to their bodies that they had for 50 years. And I'm talking about Republican women because I've been surprised at the number of Republican women, especially young Republican women, who have come up to me and say, I voted for President Trump, former President Trump, but I now feel like this big government is in my doctor's office, and I will now for the first time be voting for a Democrat. I've heard that in Ohio, in Missouri, in Michigan, and other places, because women in this country, I feel this passion and this anger from them, and it cuts across political lines.
Well, that's the thing. We've been throwing around the term pro-life and pro-choice forever without
These are
really,
meaningless.
They are meaningless.
They are meaningless labels now.
The number of women that I have heard too who say, well, I'm pro-life, but I didn't think that meant no exceptions. I, of course, wanted an exception for that. Or I'm and even pro-choice. I'm pro-choice, but I do also believe in some of these restrictions, right? There should be some sort of framework here. So I think, again, we've been debating this in a way that voters don't talk about it.
Yeah, do you think the GOP's got to change how they're talking about this?
I don't think it's an issue into 2020 at all. I mean, I talk to Republicans every day who see these internal polls. It is not in the top 4 of issues. Even look at your poll last month. It was 8%. It was under climate change.
Do you think democracy, though, is sharing some of those? Those who are concerned about the abortion decision maybe are in the democracy category?
I don't know how the question was phrased, but I think with abortion and threats to democracy, we tend to connote it with, okay, it's Democratic base, angry at Trump, or it's pro-choice, angry at the decision. Not necessarily the case. That could be a single-issue voter on abortion who's so thankful, pro-life, or folks in the Republican base being Biden's on the way to socialism.
I can just say that as someone who's been out on the campaign trail, even if you ask a voter right now about health care or about the state of democracy, abortion comes up 90% of the time. And I think that to say it's not an issue, I think is very interesting to hear, because just as someone who's out there reporting, abortion is absolutely an issue, along with inflation, along with the issues.
It's not borne out in data.
I hope Matt keeps saying that everywhere he goes, that abortion really isn't an issue in this election. I think it is exactly what infuriates women when they hear that. When you're asking a poll what's the most important issue, you may not be comfortable saying abortion, but if you say to a woman, we are now in your state, like they are in my state, forcing incest victims to give birth, when you are having doctors having to make life and death decisions around whether they go to prison or whether they take care of their patient, that is motivating voters, and it will in November.
All right, I think an underrated headline from this interview is her declaration on the filibuster. Do you think 2 seats, it's dead?
I think the filibuster is on life support. And I think if the Democrats pick up more seats, I think it will probably go away. And frankly, I think it'll probably go away if the Republicans take control.
Do you concur with that?
I mean, they should change the filibuster right before the election. The polls look pretty good for Republicans. It could, but I think it'd be a massive mistake because, again, they overreach on this and the pendulum goes right back. And without a filibuster, Republicans will take back the Senate.
Amy, we know how this town works.
Yep.
You can take it away for 2 issues. The other side's going to say, forget it.
You
all
can't.
Of it. I mean, it just
this
feels like
idea that there's a carve out, that is impossible.
Yeah.
It's either there or it's not there.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.